Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and this is my meta tier list for 1.0. I think it's very useful because I built quite a lot of characters, tested them out in the Memory of Chaos, here is 10, and I'll be giving you some of my impressions and thoughts in terms of how these characters perform as well. I think first things first, we need to look at the variables in the Memory of Chaos. The first thing is the buff that is on in 1.0 benefits hunt characters and erudition characters. So those characters generally are slightly aged out in terms of the counterparts, maybe for example destruction characters and to some extent like nihility characters. Second variable is of course monster typing. I think out of all of the monsters that I see, the one element that really stood out for me is ice element. And the reason for that is ice element is very good in a lot of stages despite the enemies not being, for example, weak to ice. One half of the Memory of Chaos is always susceptible to freeze or weak to ice from what I've experienced throughout Memory of Chaos 1 all the way to Memory of Chaos 10. That means characters, for example, like Yanting, Japat, for example, March 7th, and even Pella, when you are able to break enemies, are very effective because of that freeze that they offer. So these characters generally are pushed up slightly in terms of meta, and that is like the second key variable. Of course, other characters or other element typings, I'll put out a chart on screen here that you can see a lot of the boss weaknesses. I think a typing that is super effective right now in this meta is definitely fire as well as lightning element. These two definitely see a little bit of advantage, and characters that are supportive in nature for fire definitely see a much bigger bump. But okay, let's go in terms of my tier list. What do I think in terms of like the best characters in the game? In the S tier, like the top picks that I would say across the board, I think supportive characters and defensive characters definitely reign supreme. My personal top pick for 1.0 in terms of meta will be Japat. Why Japat? He offers freeze in his skill, he has a very thick shield, he has a revive as well, and also inbuilt aggro draw. He's versatile in the sense that you can run him with Day 1 of My New Life to give damage reduction to the whole team, or you can put on him, for example, Landau's Choice, which increases the aggro draw on him and also giving him a heavier damage reduction. As you enter the later floors, the damage is quite thick, and he doesn't have damage reduction in his kit, so Landau's Choice I think is pretty nice for him as well, given that if you have it in Super in position 5, that's a 24% damage reduction. I think Japat is probably my top pick. My second pick in terms of the character that I think ranks second will probably be joined between Bailu as well as Natasha. These are my next two, and the reason for that, I think a lot of you know, is the healing they offer is tremendous. Without them, I think it's very difficult to push in the Memory of Chaos, and I find myself running 4 defensive units in a team of 8, so 2 on each side. Other than these 3 characters, I think another character that definitely makes the top 4 will be of course a character like Fire MC. Fire MC offers a very valuable fire break damage in an AoE fashion, has good amounts of sustain and a tremendous amount of damage reduction when she puts up her skill. I think it's like a 40 plus 50 plus damage reduction. When you combo with light cones, it's even higher, making her a very adept tank with also taunting, which means it's a guaranteed aggro draw as long as it hits as well. So I think these 4 probably are my top picks, and most people probably will agree as well. Some honorable mentions in terms of a defender class that didn't make it to the list, I think would be definitely March 7. March 7 does see a lot of utility, especially if you have her at higher Eidolons. Like Eidolon 6, she actually can heal with a shield, and she's able to like put on a shield to the team to cleanse debuffs as well. For example, in this floor here, when you have this Blaze out of space, they do tremendous amounts of damage, and also Stormbringer, they have that wind shear on you in like Memory of Chaos 9. Those are the very difficult floors, and March 7 does address them quite effectively, and if you have her already ascended at 80 plus, I think her effect hit rate for her ultimate is like 65% chance of freeze, which is tremendous amount of value, especially if you're running maybe a double ice team, for example March and Japat, or maybe you're running March 7 and Fire MC. You do get away with a lot of secondary freezing, a lot of sustain as well, and this is probably my combo if you don't have two healers in the other team. So you can run these 2 in 1, and for example Natasha in the other set, and it probably might get you by a little bit as long as you can soak up enough damage from these 2. Ideally, one of them want to run the 3-star light cone defense, so you get some sustain if they use an ultimate ability as well. And in another category, like the second, like I would say tier 2, because the defensive characters really have no alternatives to them right now in the current game state that they are in. They are so important. The second one is where your options come in. I think out of all of the DPSs in the game, I will give you 3 that I think are really solid. In particular order, I think Zealer is definitely the best DPS currently in the game. A huge amount of burst, offers quantum damage, a very rare element. As you can see here, for example, pierces through Cocolia. Of course, Fire and Lightning are very easy to get also, but as you can see, the whole entire Memory of Chaos 10 has a lot of quantum weakness in it as well, and a lot of the other monsters. Even on floors where there are not many quantum weaknesses, the damage she does and the fallout ability she has is just tremendous amounts of damage, especially when you pair her with a support like Tingyun. Asta, she can deal quite a lot of damage when built very well as well. So I think Zealer is my first pick. Second pick, I think I would say, is Yanqing. He offers Ice as a very valuable element. I think probably Ice is the strongest element right now as of 1.0. Enemies don't really have that much effect hit rate, and when you break them, you freeze them. He has a lot of crit rate already, meaning that you don't really need super gear, and whatever crit damage gear that you have, because a lot of other characters can't use crit damage now when our gear are not perfected, you can just slap it on Yanqing and you will definitely see him pop off with that amount of huge crit damage as well. So these are my top 2 DPSs. I think the third place DPS will have to be Tingyun. Although he isn't like super strong in terms of being able to carry the account, he still needs to have, for example, a Hun pair to do a lot of damage, especially to tackle deeper floors. Tingyun still offers quite a bit of damage, especially when he's well built. You have his light cone, and for example, you run him with a supporter, for example, like Tingyun, I think still offers tremendous value. These 3 will round out my top picks in terms of the 3 strongest DPS right now. But honorable mentions for the DPS category, I think 2 characters come to mind will be definitely Susang as well as Danheng. The reason why Danheng is here is because there's very little wind damage dealers right now. You only have Danheng as well as Bronya, and quite a number of floors that you will see. For example, Memory of Chaos 8 is a floor that requires physical or wind, and if you don't have either of them, you will notice it's very hard. Susang similarly, if you don't have, I don't have Clara here, and she offers best in class physical breaking in terms of her self advanced action advance as well, super useful. I think these 2, even though they are 4 stars, but they are probably like in the top 10 or 12 characters in the game, these 2 are super solid. If you have them and maybe you're facing a bit of difficulty, they definitely will be a very good expertise to break physical as well as wind element weaknesses very well, especially if you're lacking in that aspect. As you can see, for example, in the boss chart that I showed, a lot of enemies are weak to physical in this rotation, and that's why Susang is also very strong. I think she's possibly one of the stronger 4-star characters of offensive type as well. Erudition characters I didn't mention a lot. I think I really like Serval quite a bit in this rotation. She does a lot of damage, shock damage. A lot of them are weak to lightning as well. Super strong. Of course, Qingque, some of people are saying that she's also very strong, but I do think she needs a little bit more investment, like Eidolon 4 and beyond, before she actually comes to play a lot. I played her a little bit, but I found that the amount of skill point consumption is quite high, especially when you're wanting to play in a team that also wants to use skill points. For example, if you want to use a freeze, you want to defend, shield, or you want to heal your characters up. I do find she's a bit lacking. She won't make it into my top like 6 or 7 DPS, and those are my honest thoughts so far. Other than that, I think Ireland is actually very strong, but he really requires a specific niche. You definitely need a character right now like Japat. He would do a lot of damage in certain floors as well when you, for example, need to burst down Svarog's arm or himself. Ireland sees a lot of damage and is a high potential. But if you have Japat in one team, you probably won't be running Ireland if you, for example, maybe put one of these 2, Zealer or Tingyuan, and maybe you have another character here as well. So those are some things to consider in terms of the damage dealers. Hook, I think, is of course really strong as well, but like I mentioned, destruction characters don't really get the buff that the Hun or Erudition characters see. Hook has a good amount of sustain in her kit, has when she hits a burning character heals 5%, but for now, Fire I think is much easier found in characters, for example like Fire MC as well as Asta, who just does so much more. Characters like Himiko also suffer from the same issue. You can find fire break damage elsewhere from Fire MC and Asta, which really offer a lot of fire break damage already, and they provide more flexible options for the rest of the team, which is why these 2 are slightly underperforming in my opinion. Okay, next up, let's talk a bit more in the third category. Let's talk about the supports as well as nihility characters. What do I think about them and how do they perform in terms of a ranking so far? I think out of all the nihility and support characters, of course the ones that outperform will be Tingyun as well as Asta and Bronya. These 3 are always, everyone knows they are solid characters, and in this rotation definitely they shine very well. I think out of all 3 of them, perhaps my top pick will have to be Tingyun. not only because she offers a lot of energy restoration, and also she also offers a lot of damage. This is more of a hyper carry meta, and a lot of the characters right now, especially when you don't have too much crit rate, they do prefer Ting Yun's kit compared to Bronya, who focus a bit more on crit damage, which is maybe catered towards more like a 1.1, 1.2 when we start hitting that Trailblaze level 65 and beyond. So I think top pick will be Ting Yun. Esther and Bronya probably are around the same depending on your type of team that you run. In my opinion, maybe Esther is the worst out of the three currently, especially when you are not playing a lot of fire teams where she really excels in as well. But I think her ability to proc dance very often, plus that speed buff, makes her very versatile. I use her personally in a lot of teams and is my favorite character, but I do recognize that these two other Harmony characters might be a little bit better as well. So those are for the 3 supports, very quick one on them. I think for the Nihility characters, the one that I think will rank number 1 will have to be Welt and Pella. These two are probably the joint top picks for Nihility characters. These two are extremely solid. Pella offers a debuff stripping, which especially against stronger monsters, some of them have attack buff on their own. If you are able to take it out as well, it does a lot for your team in terms of sustainability. Very, very strong. She also gets a bit of buffs herself. She has an AoE defense break, meaning that if you play, for example, Pella, you would solve a lot of ice break issues in an ice focused team. For example, as you can see here, is weak to ice. You play Pella here, you remove buffs, you remove defense. It prevents you from requiring, for example, Esther or Ting Yun in order to do more damage in one of the slots, allowing you to run a sustain character and maybe a second sustain character. And for example, you can run maybe a primary DPS here. Then it will look something like this, which I think is also really strong. Or you could do this as well. Pella also can be built as an AoE damage dealer, same as Welt. You can build them both for damage, for my AoE fashion. They do tremendous amount of damage, and Welt is the only one offering imaginary damage. There aren't, I think, too many right now here at the end game in terms of imaginary damage, but the slow that he offers gives your team a huge advantage, especially when the enemies are slower, means you take less damage, requiring you to use your healers and your tanks like fire MCs scale less often, which means you will be net skill point more positive. A lot of the later stages in Memory of Chaos has to do with a lot of skill point management, especially if you want to push, because each usage of skill point has to have a particular reason. Do you want to freeze the enemy? Do you need a sustain or cleanse? Those are some things that are very important to think about. So these two are my top picks in terms of Nihility characters. So those are my thoughts in terms of the Memory of Chaos meta so far. If you like such content and you found it useful as well, do like and subscribe for more of such future content. I hope this helps you in some way, and thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.